morning, guys. Like Adam said, my name's Gabe, and yes, usually I'm hanging out with kids on Sunday morning, and it's a lot of fun. And if you get to know me, one of the things I love doing most is hanging out with kids. They're so fun, they're so energetic, life-giving. But if you really get to know me, there's something I like hanging out with even more than kids. I love dogs. I love dogs. Dogs are the best. If I had it my way at our house would become a dog hotel. We would get hundreds of them. They would all sleep in our bed at night, and they would all get spoiled like crazy. Seriously, thankfully there's somebody at our house that keeps me grounded when I have crazy ideas like that. But seriously, guys, I love dogs. I've had dogs my entire life. Whether it was my grandparents' dogs, like Sandy, Freddie, and Duchess, yes, Duchess, or if it was my first dog, Chewy, short for Chewbacca. Their dogs are the best. I love them. So naturally, when Madison and I first got married, one of the first things I wanted to go do was to add a dog to our family, because that made sense. And we waited, and we moved to Arkansas, and we both got new jobs, and life got crazy and hectic. But then one night, I was laying in bed, and I get a FaceTime call from Madison. She was hanging out with one of her friends. When I answered it, the sweetest little face was looking back at me. And that is how I met Obi. Now, Obi is such a good boy. He is the best. I love him to death, but that doesn't mean that sometimes he isn't an idiot. There's so many times I look at him, and I'm like, I just want you to be better. Like, just better. Like times where it's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, I'm enjoying my day off, and then all of a sudden I feel 70 pounds of force upon my chest. Like I'm dying, and it's just Obi ready to go outside. Or when he hops up on our kitchen counter, and he pulls something down, and you come home later, pages everywhere, and it turns out Obi decided to destroy half of Madison's Bible. That was not a good day. Or this one time, Madison and I went to a local dog park, and we were walking in. We noticed this really well-trained dog and his owner in the corner, and they were playing fetch. And we weren't the only ones that noticed, because as soon as I got the leash off of Obi, this dude bolted straight for that dog. And I'm sitting back. I'm like, oh, no. All of a sudden, Obi's trying to stop to get this ball, and he just lays this dog out. Like it was like an NFL linebacker hitting a wide receiver coming over the middle. I was like, oh. We were so embarrassed, and it left us feeling like bad. But then he gives us, I have video evidence. This is kind of the face we get whenever he does these things. If you guys would watch this real quick. This is the face we have to see when he does bad things.
Did you do this?
Wait for it.
Did you do this?
Right there.
Was it you?
Look at that face. How could I get mad at that? How could I hate that? But there's so many times that he's just so stupid. But then there are moments where all those moments become worth it. Like when I'm sitting at home and he barks at a strange delivery man trying to protect his family. Or when he's trying to get as close as he can, invade your personal space so that he can just lay as close as he can next to you. Or when he does something super cute and you forget everything for a moment. You're like, oh, this dog is the best. Seriously, that's how I feel. You see, I thought before I got Obi that my life was fine. Seriously, I thought life was going good and I was all right. But then I got Obi, and it opened up these new feelings I never thought I had before, right? And don't worry, there's a lot of parents in here, and don't worry, I have a dog, so I know exactly how you guys feel. It's the same. It's the same. Don't worry. I'm kidding. But I'm sure, for a lot of us in this room, there are moments like that where we don't realize how lucky we are to have something until we get it, right? You never know what you didn't have until you get it. Like I'm thinking about that first great friend you make. And now that you have them, how could you go back to how it was before? Or becoming a parent. I have no experience, but I'm sure that the first time and the 10th time when that baby comes into the world, in that moment, all you think is, oh, this is so worth it. Everything you have in that moment. And they just showed up. They just got there. Or maybe it's a chance that's right around the corner. Or for some of us, it's a chance we've already taken. A chance to be with someone, a chance to have something, a chance at work. And now that you have gotten those things, how could you ever go to the way it was before, right? See, those are the things that got added. Those are the moments that got added. The memories, the people, the chances. You see, God adds to us so that we may give more. I'll say it again, God adds to us so that we may give more hope. If you were here last week, then you got to hear from Adam as we started this series, Give Hope. And Adam laid out with this new series, he explained these goals that as a community we want to attain, we want to reach by the end of the year. Goals that as Hope City, not only to impact here on a Sunday, but in our community as well, to not only be the church, but to go and be the church, to not only meet, but be. And those goals are amazing, and I can't wait to see and talk about them a little later. But we talked about sometimes we have to subtract things from our life in order to fully go after what God wants for us. Sometimes we have to give something up in order that God may do something great in our lives. And Adam, we opened up in John chapter 15 where Jesus is talking about himself as the vine that we grow from. And Adam continued, and we sort of talked about this language of pruning or cutting away or to shape us in a way that we may bear better fruits for the future. And that better fruit, that's hope. That's the hope we've been talking about. And this week, we're going to continue talking about that same hope. But I want to ask you guys the question for this morning. What do you need to add in order to give hope? Now, giving hope, that's like a really broad statement. Like, what does that mean? Is that me giving money to the guy at the cross light when I'm going home today? Or is that me going around my neighborhood singing Christmas carols? Like, what does giving hope really mean? Well, I think Jesus was kind of getting at this in this next section we're going to be covering and in John chapter 15. And see, Jesus, when I was reading this week, I found 3 things that I think Jesus is saying we need to add in order that we can give hope. See, we need to add peace, a purpose, and perspective. First, we need to add peace. Now, I'm going to tell you guys a story. Now, my sister would like to argue that this is not how the story went. But I am not my sister. This is how I remember the story going as an outside perspective. If you've been around me long enough, then you've definitely heard a story or two about my sister Molly. There are a lot of stories. Molly, I love her to death, but I called her and I got permission to tell this story today, so don't worry, she can't get that mad at me. But seriously, so I remember growing up, I was playing baseball, and I've talked about it before, I hate baseball. I hated it. I couldn't hit the ball. I was the most uncoordinated player on every team I played. I couldn't swing a bat, and the only reason I played is because my dad really wanted me to. So I remember one day I'm getting ready for a baseball game, dreading it, and all of a sudden I hear my sister and my dad get into an argument. Now Molly, this will let you know the kind of person she is. Very confrontational person. But Molly is also somebody that knows how to hold a grudge. Hold on to that. That'll come back later. So Molly and Dad are getting in an argument, same old, nothing new. So then all of our family, my dad, my 2 sisters, and I load up in the car. We're going to the baseball fields. And we get there, and I get dropped off, and I'm warming up, and all of a sudden it starts to sprinkle. And then like a minute or 2 later, just pouring down rain. So we all get in the dugouts, and the parents are in their umbrellas, and they're waiting it out. Well, then it rains long enough that the game got canceled. I was so happy. I was like, yes. Can we still get the sucker at the stand, Dad? So we're driving home, and in the car ride, I learned that my dad and my sister Molly they had made up. They were fine. They had peace. Did not last. We get into the house. My sister immediately bolts up to her room. Strange, but whatever. I'm taking off my cleats, and I hear my dad yell at the top of his lungs, "Molly Lynn Hoagland, you get down here right now." When you're a kid and you hear the full name, something bad happened. And Molly was... So Molly, on her way out the door, had turned around and locked our downstairs bathroom from the inside. She had left the sink running and plugged the drain. See, her plan to get back at my dad was to flood our home. And she would have flooded our home if my game didn't get canceled. Now me, I'm sitting back thinking, what is happening? But the more I think about it from this perspective, it's super funny. But I kind of see myself in this story. Now, there's a couple weird faces. Don't worry, I don't go flooding homes, I promise. I don't go around leaving sinks running. But seriously, my sister and my dad, they had peace, right? They had brokered peace between them. But it didn't last because of something Molly did. See, there was peace, and Molly messed it up. Does that sound familiar? I think of so many times in my own life where I'm holding peace. I'm holding on to it. And because of something stupid I do, I mess it up. I become restless, untrusting. I just become I just become scared and restless, and I lose that hope because of something I did. And the whole time I'm wondering, I just had it. Where did it go? I thought I had this thing, but now it's gone. See, we read Jesus, what he has to say about this in John 15, starting in verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's command and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. Jesus is saying, in order to be made full, in order to be made complete, we must remain in his love, God's love, right? Now, this idea of remaining isn't one that is limited to just securely staying in God's love, right? It also applies to actively engaging in and striving towards what he wants done, his will, right? You see, we read this word remain so often and we think of this stay still and be kind of word. But don't forget about the times that you must go and do, right? And the whole time we remain in his love, we must keep his peace, because it's that peace not only magnifies, but it shows to the world God's love when we keep his peace. See, there's this saying about peace. See, peace doesn't mean to be in a place where there is no noise, trouble, or hard work. It means to be in the midst of those places and still be calm in your heart, or to remain in God's love. You see, in this same section, Jesus uses himself as the utmost example of what it means to remain, right? And do you think that Jesus was a guy that avoided the hard, troubled, or noisy places? No. He actively went towards them. He loved those in the middle of them. He sought them out to be in them, right? He knew that when he did these things, that he was reflecting that same kind of love that God has for him and for all of us. You see, peace with ourselves and others is what we should continually strive for and maintain. When there is harmony with others, God is seen. God is seen. His love is reflected. We should seek and go after peace so that we may reflect his love. Now, I'm sure there are some of us in this room that are like, Gabe, I'd love peace. I would love to have that. But do you know how crazy my life is right now? Gabe, if you only knew what I was really dealing with, you would know that I could never have peace. I hear you. I really do, because do you know how many times I felt that about myself? Where I feel like I have no place to have peace. Do you know what is going on behind the scenes of my life? Yet, we read in Philippians 4, 6-7, the answer. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. We must ask God to add this peace to our lives, because he is the only one that can truly give it. There is nothing else in this world, no one else in this world, that can truly give you this peace. The peace of God, which transcends all understanding. A lighthouse when the waves start crashing. A shelter when the storm bears down. A hope when all seems lost. We must add peace in our lives in order to give hope. Second, we need to add a purpose. If we go back to chapter 15, we can pick up in verse 12 on what Jesus continues to talk about. See, my command is this, Jesus says, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You see, for many of us in the room, we would admit to or say that we sometimes feel like we don't know our purpose, our true purpose, right? Seriously, life can get crazy and busy and overwhelming and hectic, and sometimes it just feels like keeping our heads above the water is all we can do. If you feel like this, you aren't alone. I promise, you aren't. Because there was a recent study done that asking Americans a very simple question. How often do you wonder, how can I find more meaning and purpose in my life? It's a very simple question. And what the study found was that 62% of the people polled said that they think about this question at least once or twice a year. 15% didn't answer, and 23% said they never questioned it at all. Now, what the really interesting part of that, of everybody polled, of everybody surveyed, 40% of the people said that they think about that question at least once or twice a week. Once or twice a week. we're in a great time of wondering and questioning in our culture, right? We wonder what's fulfilling. We wonder what's worth it. We wonder whose voice we listen to. And ultimately, we let culture and outside influences decide these things and create our purpose for us. So we end up either having no purpose or having a purpose that will never leave you feeling full. Maybe your purpose is wrapped up in being a parent, and you're the best mom or dad, and you go to all the PTA meetings, and you're at every single game. Guess what? You'll end up feeling empty eventually. Maybe you find your purpose in work, and you're proud of what you've built, or how far you've come, or who the people at the office think you are. But guess what? You'll be empty soon. Maybe you find your purpose in doing and protecting what's good and right. And that's a very noble thing. But guess what? If you don't understand fully what Jesus is talking about in verse 12, that too will leave you empty. You won't understand. For me, I remember growing up, I was the kid that I found my purpose, and then being that dude that was there at church but was never fully at church, if that makes sense. Showing up every week, praying every time for small groups, talking to every single kid, being in the front row of the worship area, and of course carrying as many folding chairs as I could. That was me. That's who I was. But deep down, people thought, oh, that guy's on fire for Jesus. But deep down, I didn't know if I liked Jesus or if he even liked me. But then, because of people who lived out their purpose well, who loved well, not only did I figure out that Jesus liked me, but that he deeply loves me, that he died for me. That's the purpose we're talking about. See, that purpose that we talked about, it all comes back to that, loving others well. That's our purpose. That's why we're here, to love others like Jesus loved us and loves them. That means loving people without strings attached. That means loving people when they hurt you. That means loving people when they disagree with you. That means loving people even when they persecute you. And why do we love them when they do these things to us? Well, because when we did those things to Jesus, he still chose to love each and every one of us. A love we don't deserve, but one we've been given and now commanded to give to others. You see, Jesus continues in verse 15, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. So not only does he let us know what our purpose is, he tells us there is nothing holding you back from fully going after it. That all we need in order to fully go after our purpose is him. And that he's right there with us. And he loves us. And he wants us to love others like he does. We've been talking about this morning as a church, the season we're going into and those challenges and what's to come. And guys, as a church community, we have a couple of awesome ways to give hope this coming up. And to love those that need it most this time of year. You see, coming up next Saturday as a church, we're going to be doing our local Impact Sunday. And Adam talked a little bit about it, but that's such a great first step for us to come here, partner with Shared Beginnings, and give Christmas hope to 300 families in our community. 300 families that can't even give their families maybe the simplest of Christmas gifts. But now, because of what Jesus is doing in the hearts of so many, and because we get the chance to come alongside and work with them, we'll be able to not only provide an awesome just experience, but a story and impact their eternity, because we are the people that love them like the church is called to love them. We are the people that love them like Jesus said we're to love them. See, this is us as a church loving this community well. And not only meeting, not meeting next Sunday, but being the church next Saturday and being the church for so many. So if you haven't signed up on the board in the back, it's a great first place to start living out our purpose well and to loving those that need it this time of year. It doesn't just have to stop there, though. I'm sure when we start talking about loving others, there's so many different ideas going through people's heads of something they can do or someone they can talk to about it. Now, when we talk about loving others well, I'm sure each and every one of us has a name in our head. I know I do. Maybe it's the coworker that is so annoying, but you need to love better. Maybe it's the family member that just stresses you out this time of year, right? Maybe it's yourself. Maybe you need to take a second to understand and realize that you and them, they're all a masterpiece, a child of God. See, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we could do the things He planned for us long ago. And the things He planned for us long ago, they were to love others. To love others like He loves us. Do you know how powerful this kind of love can truly be? I read this heartbreaking but incredible story about this kind of love, about the kind of love Jesus is talking about. In April 1994, in the country of Rwanda, in the span of over 100 days, 800,000 Tutsi citizens were murdered, massacred. This 3-month killing spree changed the entire fate of not only Rwanda, but the world as well. See, the Rwanda genocide is one of the most gruesome atrocities in history. And in the middle of it, an 11-year-old boy named Jean-Claude, who was 11 when it began, he witnessed his neighbors brutally murder his father in front of him. And as he was fleeing the house, he hid in some bushes and watched as countless other neighbors came by, and they did the same to his sister, his aunts, his uncles. They massacred these people. See, after the genocide, when trying to come to terms with what happened, Jean-Claude found Jesus. He found Jesus. And he began to understand what Jesus had done for him, and the love that Jesus had for him, and the love that He called for him, for Jean-Claude to have to others. And that 11-year-old boy, he ended up forgiving the perpetrators of his family's murder because he understood Jesus' love for them. He began to witness to them and talk to them about what Jesus did for them. And he ended up baptizing one of them. That's how powerful this love is, our purpose is, when we follow it just like Jesus calls us to. We have to add our purpose in order to give hope. Third, we need to add a perspective, a new perspective. Now, in all honesty, this is the one I find myself struggling with the most. Seriously, if you talk to my wife or my family, they will say, yeah, Gabe has, the big picture sometimes doesn't come clear to Gabe. And it's seriously, it really is. I'm wired to just get stuff done and not have the idea of the big picture. I miss so many things, seriously. But here's an example. This one is for the teachers here today. When I was in high school, everybody got a laptop. That was sweet. That was so cool. I would play games and stuff on it. But if you had gone on my laptop, one of the sites that I frequented the most was this little site called SparkNotes. Let's say you're sitting in English class and your teacher assigns you to read The Great Gatsby. But you don't want to read The Great Gatsby because it's long and maybe a little boring, and maybe you just want to play video games and hang out with your friends. Instead of reading The Great Gatsby, what if you read chapter summaries that were like a minute long? I loved SparkNotes. I used it all the time. I'm admitting today, I used it all the time. You see, the quizzes would come out, and I would ace those because they were like basic questions. But then the written final would come. I didn't read the book, so I didn't do well. Let's just leave it like that. My mom would always be like, how does this happen? I don't know, Mom, the questions are hard. I don't have that great reading attention. But seriously, see, my teacher, all she wanted me to do was read this great book, to learn, get some cultural experience, right? But I didn't want to do that because I wanted to do something else. I lost sight of the big picture. It's like same thing in high school. I didn't have the great attendance. I didn't know colleges looked at attendance. Or when I played sports, the preseason conditioning, I didn't try that hard. So I got gassed in the middle of games all the time. Like things like that. I lose sight of the big picture all the time. And I see that's what Jesus is kind of getting at here in verse 16 of chapter 15. We read, "You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last, so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you." You see, so often we lose sight of the big picture. We lose sight of the things that really matter. We forget things like who chose us. We forget that we are called to make something that will last. We forget who will remain by our side in the middle of it all. We forget those things. And you see, Jesus here is reminding us that He is the one that chose us. Right? Because of how much He loves you and what He did for you. You see, don't forget, He chose to die on that cross because ultimately he knew who it was for. He knew who it was going to save. He knew who it was going to make right, us. And he chose to do that for us. And just like we talked about, our appointment or our purpose is to love others like he does. You see, Jesus is connecting that when we trust in him and keep this perspective, that we are ultimately focusing on our purpose and accomplishing it because that's what he wants for us to do. And in that process of going after our purpose, we begin to make an impact because of Jesus forever. Forever. An impact that will last long after we're gone. An impact that will last long after we're gone. And my favorite part of this verse is the last section, because it reminds us of who's ultimately there. That Jesus is saying that when you're going after this purpose, what you need, I got you. Whatever you need to fulfill my purpose, to love others well, I will be with you in it. I will be right beside you, and we can do this together. Because my Father wants his purpose completed. And he wants to use you and me and every single one of us in this room to accomplish that. Jesus ends this section in verse 17 with one last reminder. This is my command. Love each other. Love each other. Now, this love that he commands for us to have, it begins to impact and it gives us windows of opportunity so that we may impact eternity. Seriously, when you love somebody like Jesus is talking about here, and you keep the perspective on what is important, people begin to see something different in you. You begin to look like a person that sees things from a different perspective. A perspective that isn't something that everyone will have, but it's something we must work for. It's something that Jesus calls us to have. You see, when you do this and people notice and they begin to question, who is this Jesus guy? Why is he different? You begin to make them step away from walking into death and turning into life. That's the stakes. That's eternity. And it may be the big things. It may be the little things. But remember what this is all for. How we can impact generations. How we can impact eternity. Keeping that perspective will help you be a person that will give hope. You see, one of the challenges Adam talked about last week was centered around this goal called the Give Hope Initiative. Now, what that means is as a church, by the end of the year, we want to be to a place where we are 50% self-sustaining, which comes out to around $12,500 of ministry expenses. After we receive this amount of money, 50% of everything we receive will go to forward funding our outreach events. That's awesome things we did, like our Johnson Square events, our partnership with Tyson Elementary, our group serving in the community, and whatever else God has in store for this awesome community. The other 50% will go to impacting and giving hope to families in our community this year through our partnership with Shared Beginnings. See, on the next slide, there are a couple great first steps to giving and some easy first steps to take. Remember, Jesus himself said that he said that it is more blessed to give than to receive. It is more blessed to give than to receive. And when we give, we begin to align our hearts with Jesus. And we begin to not only look more like him, but we get to begin to go after things that he has called us to love and to do. I love to talk about my family. Seriously, I love to talk about my family. And one of the people I love to talk about most is my grandma. We call her Appa. Now, Appa she's a person that keeps a great perspective for me of what is to come. See, Appa, she looks forward to the day that God calls her home because she knows what is waiting for her. She knows the things that she has done, and she knows the trust that she has placed in Jesus. And now she will delight in the gift that she will get for following after what he has. See, my grandpa was a person that gave a lot of who he was and a lot of what he had to those around him. And he loved others well. And my grandma, she is no different. But yet, she is a great reminder of what's waiting for me because of my love for Jesus. See, when she reminds me of these things, I think back to 2 Timothy 4:8. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but to those to all who have longed for his appearing. You see, my grandma is someone that understands what is to come. But more importantly, she understands what needs to be done while she's here. The significance, the importance, the understanding that what she leaves behind matters. The legacy that one has can impact generations and ultimately create eternal change. See, my grandma is a woman that left a legacy of faithfulness, trust, and love for Jesus. A legacy she's passed on to me, my mom, my sisters. She's impacted our generation. And you see, that is an impact I one day hope to have. I one day hope to have that same impact. See, when we keep this in this perspective on eternity, we begin to get in order the things that we need to accomplish here. And in that, God partners with us in leaving a legacy that lasts. We need to add a new perspective in order to give hope. You know, when it comes to this time of year, I always find myself coming back to Christmas. I love Christmas. And Christmas is so much fun. The things we do, hanging out with the family, being around each other all season, right? But then I sort of think about the Christmas story. This amazing story of how God chose to give us the most amazing gift for this time of year. The gift that brings us closer to Him. The gift that makes right all the things we did wrong because He loves us and He chose us. And I think about Mary and Joseph and just what all they had to go through. The trials they had to face. How disappointed their families were. How the town must have been talking all about them. Did you see the weird couple? Did you see no way that she cheated on him? How can he be with her? The hard truth that they thought they knew. These people thought they knew. But they didn't even understand a little bit. They didn't understand what was coming. And in the middle of that, God gave them these things. See, God gave them a peace over the situation. A peace that what they were doing would matter. A reassurance from angels themselves that where they were going is somewhere He will be with them. He gave them both a purpose. To raise and to love this child until the day he is ready to go. And they gave them both a perspective. God allowed them both to understand exactly who this child was going to be. Not only for the two of them, but for the entire world. The significance that he was going to have. This tiny child on that one night, that God let them have these things because He knew it was important for them to continue. You see, Jesus, when He was born that day, He began the long journey. A journey that would ultimately lead to Him loving and living life and impacting the world through His death. A death He didn't have to do, but one He chose to do on our behalf because of how much He loves us. And how He, instead of us going into death, we are now given life forever. You see, in order to truly give hope, we must add these three things. We must add peace, a purpose, and a new perspective. So that when God asks you to love like He loves, you can give everything. We're going to go into a time of prayer. And what that means is it's just a minute every week where we take a moment to remember that same love that Jesus has for us. That same love that still exists because of what He chose to do on that faithful day. On that day where He was laying on a cross. And He died so that I may be saved. So that I may be with Him forever. So that I may not fear what is to come. But like my grandma, understand what is there. Understand what's waiting for me. That doesn't mean that the times don't get tough. And that the seasons don't get long. And that the times don't get heavy. It means in the middle of those things, remembering who is by our side. Remember that we have been given a peace that transcends all understanding. We have been given a purpose to love others. And we have been given a perspective to impact eternity. Now that's going to look different for every single one of us in the room. And I don't know what it means for each and every one of you, but here's what I do know. I know that we serve a God that loves to be asked some really good questions. So maybe in these next few moments, you need to just have a conversation. God, what do you want from me? Where do I live out my purpose? How can I keep this perspective? And God, I just want your peace. We're going to be going into a time of prayer. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to step into that. Dear God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that we get the blessing of remembering what this time of year is really special, why it is. It's special because of you. And it's special because of the choice you made to send your son down here to live a life and to ultimately become a sacrifice for me. A sacrifice that he didn't have to make, but one he chose because of how much he loves me. And God, even when we persecuted and hurt and belittled Jesus, he still chose to love us. So God, please help us in this room to love those that do the same to us. And that in the middle of it, we remember who it is all for. And we remember who's right by our side. It's in your name I pray. Amen.